All right, and I'd like to invite now, welcome to the studio, Ukraine's ambassador to Australia, Vasyl Myroshnychenko. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Good evening.
Now, this argument from Zelensky is that he needs security guarantees, but he was in the White House to sign the minerals agreement. It's been presented to him at least 3 times. Why hasn't he signed it?
I think we just have to look at a broader picture because one of the elements which has been discussed, as we've seen in the videos, was a ceasefire. And for Ukraine to commit to a ceasefire, we need to have those security guarantees. As you know, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. We signed a ceasefire with Russia in 2015. After that, Russia has violated 25 times and broke the ceasefire deal, including many of those times on Trump's watch when he was the president. So we don't really trust Russia. More so, we have given up the third largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in 1994 in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, US, Britain, France, and China, so that we get assurances that our borders will be always like they were in those days. And everybody who signed the deal have not delivered on the deal because Russians came back and they destroyed us in 2014, got emboldened by the very weak reaction of the global community, and they came back 8 years later with a mission to destroy Ukraine's sovereignty.
Despite this understandable distrust of Russia, isn't it worth going to the negotiating table? How else does the war end?
We want this war end more than anybody else. But for that to happen, that was a concept which was offered by President Trump. It's peace through strength. And we need to demonstrate unity because security in Europe depends on American commitment. It's the backbone and the bedrock of that is NATO. And it was actually those countries and the leadership of America and leadership of Britain to create a coalition of countries in support of Ukraine have enabled Ukraine to defend herself. And we are extremely grateful for that. Australia has contributed and chipped in with military equipment and other financial assistance. But to end this war, we have to be strong. And for us, to make sure that Russians don't come back, we need to have some serious guarantees. And let me just explain to you, critical deal is fine. It's negotiated. And I'm sure it will be signed. I hope to be signed, that it will be signed soon.
It could have been signed on Friday, 5 days before that.
But it was not the problem. It's not the problem. The critical deals is not a problem. Because at the end of the day, how can we get investors to commit into the development of critical minerals if Ukraine does not have security guarantees? If Russians can come back 4 years later, destroy what's been done or capture what's been developed, it's a cornerstone for any rebuild and reconstruction in Ukraine, because no private capital is going to come to Ukraine if we don't have security guarantees, because there is no guarantee that Russians will not come back. And they've done it already once in 2022, and they will come back later. They just need time to restock, resupply, and regroup and mount another attack. So for Ukrainians, it's existential to have a security guarantee. And the most viable option is to become a NATO member. If we can't become NATO member now, we should build NATO in Ukraine.
So
strong military, strong strategic conventional weapons on the territory of Ukraine, which would be, non-nuclear, but which would serve as a deterrent, air defense systems, long-range missiles, a presence of a navy of a NATO country in the Black Sea. There must be a deterrent or boots on the ground, as British and French are now discussing potentially as for that. And this is how we can then get the investors, including American investors, to come into critical minerals. As you know, here in Australia, development of any minerals takes years. We're talking about at least 2 decades that needs to take place before we can even have any revenue from those resources. But in that time, we need to make sure that that area is protected. We have the security guarantees to develop them.
The meeting in the Oval, though, was meant to be about the minerals deal. So if there were concerns about the security guarantee, shouldn't that have been raised prior instead of having that argument in front of the media, which ended up being this, embarrassing spectacle for all involved?
I'm not across all the agenda which was out there because my mandate is Australia and New Zealand. This is what I'm responsible for. So I cannot comment on the approach and strategy of what had to be discussed there and at what sequence. But I'm giving you the official position of the country of what needs to happen when. And a critical mineral deals was actually something that Ukraine has offered to America. That was our part of our victory plan that President Zelensky announced at the end of September. And he brought it to America. President Trump liked it. They worked on the text. It took us 2 weeks to develop the text. Everybody was happy with that. And that was a discussion. And of course, it's very unfortunate of what we've seen, what happened. But nevertheless, American commitment to security in Europe is essential. And European Union is the largest donor of Ukraine. 138 billion euros was provided to Ukraine by the European Union, only then followed by the United States. So even if you look at the top 5 countries who supported Ukraine, 4 of them are European. America is still number 1 in terms of as an individual country. Other individual countries, Germany is number 2, followed by Britain, followed by Netherlands, followed by France. So we see these countries, which are European countries. Of course, they need to spend more money on defense, and I think that was part of the discussions that we've seen in London. We'll probably see more of that on Thursday when Giorgia Meloni will be hosting a summit. But at the end of the day, security in Europe depends on America. Security in Indo-Pacific depends on the U.S. leadership.
Absolutely.
And therefore, we are all in the same boat with Australia to make sure that America stays committed to its security guarantees globally.
Well, given what you've just outlined about how American investment is by far higher than any other country, then do you think, and this is what the critics have said, that Zelensky should have been more respectful when he was in the Oval Office, that he shouldn't have taken the bait and engaged in an argument with the President of the United States?
President Zelensky is a wartime leader, and you cannot really learn to be a wartime leader. And he was offered a ride in exchange, and he said, I don't want a ride, I need ammunition. And he was fighting, and he demonstrated that he can fight, and this is what inspired the international community.
He was fighting, but he set back Ukraine's interests with America by having that public argument with the president.
And that was a commitment that U.S. government has put on the signature of the Budapest Memorandum. That was a security guarantee that was provided in 1994 by the President of the United States of America, who asked us to give up those nuclear weapons. That was part of the deal. We also destroyed our strategic aircraft, which carries some strategic bombers, which were also destroyed and dismantled. And that was part of the deal which happened in 1994. So we now have countries supporting us because they put their signature there. And I think we had an agreement, and that was an agreement that was in place. So what Zelensky is currently doing, Zelensky is protecting Europe and protecting the free world, because we understand how that will further embolden Putin, how it can embolden other authoritarian leaders. Because if a global power, which is a nuclear country, which is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, can change borders by force, what kind of world does it leave for Australia? Where the security of New Zealand going to be? What's going to happen to Japan? What if North Korea is going to get nuclear weapons? Now, we all understand that nuclear non-proliferation is dead, because now countries see that probably nuclear weapons is the only solution. And this is what we are seeing. We gave it up voluntarily, and we got invaded, we got destroyed. Our people get killed on a daily basis. You can imagine how many people were watching that video from the Oval Office, including all those at the front lines, including all those displaced people.
All the families of young men who lost their lives.
Yes,
I just want to ask you, we're out of time, but I just want to ask you one final question about Australia. Now, there are sanctions on Russia, and yet Australia remains one of the world's largest imports of oil-based Russian products. And this is via much of this is via third countries like India. It's been described as a legal loophole. What is your comment on our Prime Minister standing up, expressing support for Ukraine, but yet at the same time helping to fund the war by being one of the world's largest importers of Russian-based oil products?
I'm personally thankful to Prime Minister Albanese for his support. I'm also thankful personally to the Leader of Opposition, Peter Dutton, for the statements and support provided to date. Support for Ukraine is bipartisan. And we, of course, ask Australia to continue supporting us, to impose more sanctions. And, of course, the issue of oil needs to be addressed. it's all about the terms of trade and WTO definition of the country of origin. Because if the product changes and it's already processed in India or Singapore, the country of origin becomes
so this
India.
legal loophole disappoints you?
It's not a loophole. These are the terms of the World Trade Organization. This is how it works. We want that to be addressed, and if this could be addressed by the Australian government, we'll certainly welcome that. But this is just the legal matter which is out there. But of course, we can use the frozen Russian assets. Nobody has to pay for our security. 300 billion Russian assets, most of them are in Europe. We should use that money to buy weapons for Ukraine in America, in Australia, in Europe, to fund Ukraine. Nobody has to pay for our security. We should use Russian money that they have to pay for what they've done in Ukraine.
Ambassador, really appreciate your time here
Thanks
tonight.
for having me.
Thank you so much.